All right, so to start with, I actually need to assemble this mortar housing. So this goes together, and this piece normally would actually be kind of the back panel that goes behind the throne inside the cockpit. But since we're not using that piece, it then attaches normally this way onto the mortar housing. So, in order to use that, we're going to use that as a placement guide to help build the entire body since we're not using the entire cockpit. Then we'll have the full opening available to figure out how to actually set this guy up to be able to see out once we do cut the opening into the carapace. So, to start with, this guy can just go together with some basic super glue because it's not going to be structural. Okay, I want to squeeze too hard. There we go. Just a nice. So then pop that on. And it probably doesn't need it, but that's set in there pretty nice. Now this, I won't bother hitting it with the zip kicker. It's just not necessary. Then this one is going to go right in there. And that looks like that's sitting in there really nicely. So let's go ahead. We're going to bead the glue all the way around. It just barely touches on the bottom. It does have a, let's see, a little spot right along here. That should touch. All right. Now let's hold that for a second. Oh, hey. That was unexpected. Thought that was set. All right, so then, in that case, we're going to hit that little zip kicker. Before we now put on this piece. That's a tight one. I didn't really. Doesn't want to sit in there, so we're gonna break that back off. It's nice. That's why super glue is good. We're gonna get that all set. All right, now. That to sit in there a little better. Hit it with a little zip kicker. All That one's good. Oops. A little slippery with zip kicker on my fingers. Get that set in. I just want to kind of almost push it in with the paper towel. Right on those inside seams. Now that should be real solid. Okay, and then let's get this other edge. See if I can get that held. A little zip kicker. It does evaporate pretty fast, but still kind of gets in the way. A little more on the inside here, just to be safe. Come on. Look at the tip of my super glue. Might have gotten a little zip kicker or something in it. That's better. It's nice to keep a little pin around, a little thumbtack just for that. There we go. All right, that looks nice. Make sure you clean that off. All right, so then for the rest of this, I do want to use the two-part epoxy. So then let's get a little of this, and we can just mix a little bit up. I think we're going to need too much. Some of the connections are pretty big and flat. There we go. And the cap does only go on one way, so you can't mess it up. So I'll mix that up for a second or two here, just till we get a nice consistent color. I'm not worried about using the same cup over. All of the previous epoxy that was used is dry, hard as a rock. So I'm not going to worry if somehow this new glue were to soften the old stuff. I can't see how that would actually hurt anything anyway. I'm sure someone will tell me otherwise, but I think for this, it should be all right. All right, I think that's good. Let that get this out of the way. And then let's take a look here. All right, so we've got the side body panel and the back and the other side. Then this is the front. All right, it's going to go on under like this. And then this, once everything is together, is the bottom. So it'll go on underneath. All right, so let's start by, basically, we'll set that down. And then these are going to go together like this, where this is going to set on top and kind of in. So I think the best spot to glue is probably going to be just along this flat inside edge, right along here. All of this should make contact. All down here. Now, this doesn't need to be goo thick. I don't want it running off and spreading too much out onto the model surface. So we'll wipe it away. And then I'll set that down for a second. I really want to think about how this is going to hit, right? And that should actually be everything that'll make contact. The top edge here. Need a little. Now that should be all of it for that. Then, yeah, this should be able to go on. And it's going to be movable for a little bit. All right, that should be right about there. All right, this bottom edge should connect. Now, if I were actually smart and good and planned ahead, I would have remembered to grab a bunch of rubber bands or something. But I'm not that smart. So, once I get this set, well, we're just going to have to, we got glue on both surfaces. We're good for now. We've got a few minutes to work here. All right, getting them set together. Get some glue on both contact points, both surfaces. Once it starts to set up, we'll make it so that everything sets together quite nicely. All right, so we got that one. And then back here, remember not to grab certain edges now. And then this one will go here. All right, so we want to get that set. All right, so we've got nice contact. Should work really good. Still not going to set. That's good, not a problem. All right, the front then. Let's see how that's going to set. Going to go right in here. So this whole surface and I am fully aware my fingers are probably going to get some epoxy on them. It's really not too much of a concern. Now this outer edge, that'll end up connecting to the carapace later. So here, and on this outside, and maybe this one, in the interest of not covering myself, maybe this one, I'll actually pay attention to how I pick up the other piece here. So let's see. Grab, that's going to end up going right there. Oh, and I did hit, well, I got the right edge there. And there. I got an edge that I didn't really need in there, a face. Should not really be an issue. Okay, so we can set this guy down. Pick this one up. Same thing. Right in there. It's nice contact. Right, and then the bottom, once we get the sides all together, should hopefully set in really nicely. It's keyed, so it's got the points on the front. It's really, yeah, it's starting to get a little tacky. So let's set that down for a second. Clean anything off. Don't want to get anything onto the surface of the model. All right, I think my hands are clean. Make sure the other bits here, those parts there, not getting used at all. This, I'm pretty sure we're just going to end up let's get this before we set up here. It's getting close. Definitely getting close. All right. No problem. Now, I'm going to end up needing to cut a pretty good chunk out of this later in order to install the magnet in the bottom of the body. But for right now, I don't know exactly where that'll be. So we're just going to glue it all together and then worry about drilling that out later. All right, let's set aside for a second. Now let's start with the side here and the back panel. That should set right on there. Oops. Just pushing a little too hard. Settle down a little. Go right there. And then set the other half of the front on. There. Oh, the same syndrome. All right. Too many parts, not enough hands. Just let that set for just another minute. Just trying to make sure I keep my fingers clean. That's nice. And the, closer we get to this setting, the easier this stuff is going to get. Because it's just going to want to stay together. So now this should set on really nicely. Or not. It's all right. We're close. We're close. I think it's not necessarily helping to try to hold everything out for a camera, but it's definitely not the issue. It's just slow setup. And, following the actual directions and building this in the correct sequence so that it were built off of a center core that's already solid would also be very helpful. But since we are not really concerning ourselves with directions and standard builds, we're going to kind of go off course there. Do things a little differently, which, at times, it's getting close, really close right now. Here it goes. Now it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Or maybe not. I don't know. I think once I get this, I think we're close to the right spot there. I think that looks right. There it is. All right, just had to be rotated back just a little. Then, I believe the bottom here should set in quite nicely. All right, that fits in there pretty good. I think I don't want to put too much pressure on anything. Oh, this actually has to come back here. And I don't know if what happened there. This appears to be pushed up. It doesn't want to sit. There it goes. The bottom piece is slightly deformed. The working time on the epoxy, in some ways, really helpful. In some ways, kind of a pain. Because now, as it starts to set up, it gets pretty tacky, but still doesn't really hold. So now, before it gets too far here, hopefully, this piece, it doesn't need to be glued in right now, but it can actually set in here to make sure the spacing is correct to the back here. I'm actually pushed a little too far, but it looks like it's going to set in there quite nice. I thought that was going to happen. That little cable on the bottom is what's actually keeping it level. I kind of figured I should just cut it off, since it was going to have to be taking force, but it's fixable. All right, everything is starting to come together nicely. I say I don't love working with two-part epoxy. Standard model glue is much nicer to work with, at least in my opinion. I like being able to kind of set two pieces in place, glue them, and essentially be done with it. Whereas with two-part epoxy, it doesn't quite work that way. I think here on the back, I'd rather err on the side of getting the back corners to fit. And if there's any gap, leaving it at the bottom here, because this doesn't all want to come together perfectly. Which, in the grand scheme of things is pretty normal. That's what a filler is for. So, just going to kind of keep making sure, working my way around that all of the seams here are actually together and everything's looking really nice. Slight ordeal at the beginning, but it always is. Like this, I can actually get a little closer. That's better. The bands, if those don't actually meet, that becomes very obvious that something's off. So that, I think, is more important. Boy, that's got to actually be intended to be just slightly inside that gap. Based on where these are when they line up, that just seems to make sense. That's all lining up nicely. And any of these gaps, since I'm not sure what's going to be happening for lighting, I want to try to fill from the inside if necessary, to make sure that there's no light leaks. Because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some interior lighting. Not sure exactly how much, but we'll do as much as possible, really. Now then, oops, that should sit in there. Actually sits in there pretty nice. It should go behind there just a little. All right, that should be good. Now that'll hold that piece in the back from coming out. Yeah, I can see, and I don't know if you can see on camera, on the inside there, that's actually set in pretty nicely in the back. So I think that's in a good spot. Everything does appear to actually be where we want it. It's always nice when that happens. All right, and so what we'll end up being left with is this space right here in the front where our cockpit's going to end up being. So we're going to end up right in there, I think. I mean, it's going to be right being touching this. That's about where we'll end up. So as we look at this, right, as I can rotate it back, you'll see where that skull sits. So then the cockpit will end up sitting right under that. So we'll have a pretty seamless transition to our cockpit. And then it might be really cool to actually just build more of a horizontal surface rather than just a vertical surface, because the previous one just had vertical walls. So if I can build like more of a horizontal surface with more control panels on the sides, I can even light up more stuff so that when we're looking through the opening of the carapace, we'll be able to see more stuff to the sides. I think that'll be a lot cooler than just having vertical walls. Yeah, we're going to do something like that. All right, trying to deal with the curve and building all little kind of bits and pieces on the curve. No, it's fine. I mean, no matter what, we're going to be dealing with a curve in here somewhere. So I'm going to take this piece out. It doesn't need to be in right now. Take one more kind of glance around and make sure all of this looks good. Just drop it in again. I think I'm going to try to basically squeeze everything up to it. Make sure it's as tight as I can get it. So, again, resin is one of those things. It's a little bit finicky just because the whole process. Sometimes some of the pieces get slightly warped. Usually it's more big flat pieces, but these I don't think were warped at all. I think there's just some slight imperfections because really there could just even be some little goo left in some of the corners from the casting process that I didn't see or didn't know wasn't supposed to be there. But no matter what, all of this fits up really nice. There's really not going to be any problems. Try to straighten this out a little bit more. Right, and then at some point, just have to decide to leave it alone. I think, these two big metal beams back here meet up nice. That's a big visual kind of straight line that if that's not right, I think it's going to be noticeable. As long as that's right, I think everything else is just going to kind of work out okay. And, just about anything can be fixed, but minor modifications, things like that are all we really want to do. I can fix other stuff a lot more easily than I can fix a straight line. Any fix to a straight line has to be tapered over a great distance. It's not hard or not easy to do on a short distance like we have here, so we'll get that one lined up. And I think that looks pretty good. Hopefully it doesn't really move too much more. I don't really see any other little gap right there. I'm going to check and make sure if I squeeze here, I'm not pulling something out of position back here. All looks good. Check on the inside. All my gaps look good in there, pretty even. Drop that back in, make sure it fits. It seems to be where it's supposed to be. So, I guess I could glue that in, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. Just leave it in there as a guide. And it actually lines up back here really nicely. The carapace will sit on there really well. All right, I think that's good. We're going to let that sit up, harden for a while, not mess with it anymore. I'll take that back out for now. All right, so that's got to sit for a while and do its thing, cure, and we'll be back later.